What's up? I'm back. This is your host, Siris King. In this segment, I'm going to talk about a concept called demoralization and compare it to conspiracy theories and kind of tell you why demoralization is really the big problem, not conspiracy theories. In fact, conspiracy theories are not, they're not actually part of the problem. Conspiracy theories are the problem. Demoralization is something that it was made famous by a ex KGB agent. His name is Yuri. I'm not gonna botch his last name, but Yuri Bezmenov or Bezmenov, right? Where he was ex KGB agent. I think he lives in Canada now. I think he's still alive. He lives in Canada, and he basically described how demoralization was something that Russian or so at that time Soviet Union intelligences, which the KGB specifically, um, used against the population. And basically, what it entails is you is the way basically where you interfere with the population's ability to learn. So basically, you have to take over maybe the education, the academic system, right? And if you have time, other systems too. But academic system is key because they're the ones who actually are teaching people. But then if you could take over media, you could spread over to other segments of society. But basically, once it's implemented, it hurts your ability to process information. So what that means is when a person is demoralized, you can tell them up is up, down is down, and they're gonna still tell you no, down is up, right is left, left is left, left is right, and there's nothing you can do about it. And people will hear this and they'll say, I don't believe that. I mean, even if they do, they will say, well, okay, even if that's the case, it's about the hidden knowledge or secret knowledge, and you're not getting it. Once you demoralize, there is no hidden knowledge. Like if you can't even process basic information, and in a sense, when you look at it carefully, that's exactly what gave birth to conspiracy theories as we have it today. Are they conspiracies that's real? Of course they are. You can go and research. There's plenty of conspiracies that's real. There's no question about it. But when when your mind is demoralized, it's very hard then to process. Like gonna have a hard time with regular information, let alone something at the level of conspiracy. And what happens is it ends up transforming something that's real, and you hype it up. It becomes almost cartoonish, and anyone else who's very logical, and all because you're logical doesn't mean that you're perfect. You may be logical and can't think outside the box. That happens all the time. But once it's once that real information is transformed and all the cartoon elements come into it, more stably minded people wouldn't accept it. So in a sense, you kind of kill two birds with one stone. The person who believes in the conspiracy theory, they probably only got 30% of it right. The other 70% of it they don't got right. And then the other person who's neutral, the independent, they'll look at that person and say, "Oh, that stuff is crazy." But all that stuff comes from demoralization. So even the person who's logical, even the person who thinks they're into science, who swears they're so smart, unless you're able to actually basically reverse the effects of demoralization, it cannot work. You cannot. Basically, there's nothing you could do. And the crazy part of it is it was probably implemented in the '60s, right, in America, because it's Russian in style, but American intelligence saw how, oh, this works. Like, this is like beautiful. So they said we could use this in our own population. So they used it on the American population, and in the '60s. So you're basically talking about it takes 10 to 15 years to implement. So basically by the '70s or maybe '80, but mid '70s, '80, the whole population was very demoralized, and it continued. The only reason why it's under threat now is because there's so much information out there that even if your brain can't process information, because remember, when you're demoralized, you can't process the right information. It doesn't matter if you tell someone a fact. Like, perfect example of how our society is demoralized, right? Perfect example. If you take our political process, right? There'll be people who say, "Oh, Donald Trump is bad because he kicked the baby out of his town hall, right? He kicked the baby out of his town hall," and they'll say, "Oh, that's bad." But when he says, "Oh, I'm the president and I would actually kill the family of terrorists," so he's basically saying I would kill civilians, which is basically terrorism in itself, and he's saying he would do that as the president. But no one would look at that and remember that. They only remember, oh, he kicked out a baby. So if you look at it, That's a demoralized mind. Meaning, demoralized minds, because they cannot process information, they tend to gravitate to foolishness, or they tend to gravitate to things that are emotional in nature, which actually enhances the demoralization. Because to be honest, yeah, they kind of mastered demoralization in Russia, but, well, I didn't say they mastered it. They created it as we know it today. But the Americans mastered it because the Americans knew all you gotta do is put it with a highly sensitive topic, right? You educate someone, but then you almost have code words or trigger words. If something is highly sensitive, the emotions come in, and once the emotions come in, that person is definitely not gonna be able to get past either the emotional standpoint or the fact that their brain cannot process information. Now, for me, I do think the spiritual community, even though I'm very hard on the spiritual community, I would say the spiritual community does have a chance to reverse it, because in spirituality, you do. I mean, if it's real, right? If you're practicing a real, if you have a real spiritual lifestyle, one of the first things you understand is, oh, I'm trying to transform. When I transform, the person, like, if, let's say John is doing spiritual work. When John starts in the year 2000, right? He's doing spiritual work. By 2021, that John is a different John, literally. And if that John's a different John, technically that John has the ability, even demoralization cannot stop him, right? The only way demoralization can stop him, which is actually doing it right now, is that a lot of spiritual teachers are so out in space that many people think it's about the secret knowledge, or it's just about escaping the earth, that they don't really realize when you demoralize, you literally have to reprogram how your brain works. I mean, anyone wants to doubt that, all you gotta do is just look at when someone gets recruited by an intelligence agency. Sometimes they have to be re-educated, because especially if they're doing intelligence gathering. Why? Because the whole population is demoralized, literally. Why do you think people think of what people care about? There are people who would say, as long as my leader is a Christian, I don't care if he's smart or dumb. That is a demoralized mind. If you think about it, you're basically saying, as long as your leader has a certain religion, he could be dumb, he could be whatever, and you're going to still follow him, because your mind cannot process information anyway. The only information you actually process is, like I told you, something that stimulates your emotions with what? Christianity. See, everyone has different things that stimulate their emotions. Whether for some people it's Christianity, for some people it's superiority to their race, right? For some people it's money. But when you look at all these things, society then becomes at a standstill, because even if you're educated, even if you're rich, you never really challenge the system. That's the difference. You never really challenge the system. The system doesn't change. In fact, demoralization, I know some people may not like this, is highly connected to even things like socialism. Because you would have people who say, well, I like a person like, let's say, Bernie Sanders. Right? You say, I like a person like that. And I think Bernie's a nice guy. But in the current way of doing things, does socialism work? Of course it doesn't work. You could just tell that, because look at all the countries outside of Scandinavian countries, which in a sense it works for them. But even when you say it works for them, when you look at socialist structures, right, the government is the end all be all power. It's much harder to have revolution. Yes, you could. I mean, there's some Scandinavian countries that kicked out the bankers. It's possible. But when you look at those countries that it will work, the countries where it will work would have to be people, for the most part, of the same ethnicity. There have to be people who are educated past a certain point. And the reason why I said educated past a certain point, because the problem with socialist structures as you have it today is, you can go to the people who don't have access to education. You give them a whole bunch of stuff. They don't say, well, we got to get educated. They say, oh, okay, I have a whole bunch of stuff. I'm chilling now. And then what happens is they become pawns, because the global power, the global structure, the global elites are 3 or 4 times ahead of everyone. This is what people who sometimes are into conspiracy theories don't understand. They're 3 or 4 times ahead of you. There's some conspiracy theories that they actually put out about themselves. There's some conspiracy theories that are just put out there to distract you. And that's what people don't understand. They're 3 or 4 times ahead of you. So when you come in, and I understand, if you're living in poverty, why would you care about what's going on in other countries? You wouldn't, right? But the problem is, you're fighting a system that operates globally, right? You find a multinational system. So when you look at it from that standpoint, socialism's easy for them because all you gotta do is they gotta take over the government, boom, boom, done. Underclass, give them a whole bunch of stuff. The people who could fight you, meaning the people who have money, you make everything equal again. Which sounds good in theory, but the only way equal societies work is when the society itself is already spiritual. You know, like when people look at utopian fantasies, like when you look at utopian science fiction fantasies like Star Trek, yeah, Star Trek, the people of Earth are living in a socialist structure. Why? Because everyone's aligned. When everyone's aligned, no one's going to abuse power. But when you're living in a structure like we have now with in the 21st century, all civilizations, it's not really set up for socialism or communism. So even though a lot of capitalists might demonize socialism and communism is not bad. It's just a socialism and communism in its current form, in its current society, it's easier for the globalist elite to take that over. That's the difference. So when you look at conspiracy theory, whether you're talking about the moon landing wasn't real, whether you're talking about is there such a thing as the Illuminati, right? That's the perfect example. When you look at this conspiracy theory like the Illuminati, people would just be like, they'll write things off like, oh, that's Illuminati. But when you really start to study and decode and analyze things, you realize, oh, there's like 4 or 5 different power structures. Yeah, they might have times when they come together, right? They might have certain things they agree with. But when you just label, oh, that's Illuminati, number one, that's lazy way of thinking. Number two, you really didn't do the research. And number three, even if you did the research, you're doing the research from a conspiracy theorist who didn't clean his or her mind from the effects of demoralization. Put it like this. If you're a conspiracy theorist and you spinning conspiracies and you don't know that, oh, your mind is demoralized. Your mind is basically you cannot process information correctly. Then your conspiracy is flawed. And that sounds tough, but it is the way it is. I mean, I have the links on my page of the concept of some videos about demoralization and the person who made it famous. And again, I'm not saying you should worship this, Yuri, right, this ex-KGB agent. No. But I like the fact that he brought demoralization to the table because it is something that even as spiritualists, it affects us. Because if you're a spiritualist, if you're into spirituality, and you haven't addressed that, demoralization is not, because people think, well, yeah, spirituality addresses it when they say, I'm in a search for truth. Yes, in the old days, people wonder why Buddha could receive enlightenment from just meditating. When people always ask, damn, Buddha just meditated and he received enlightenment. There are people now in the West meditating all day and nothing's happening because Buddha wasn't demoralized. That's the biggest difference. Buddha was able to do that because he wasn't, there's a few other reasons, I'm not going to lie. But he wasn't demoralized. In the end of the day, if you meditate and you don't know about demoralization, even if you don't call it demoralization, if you don't know that your brain's ability to process information has been damaged, and it's not the same as saying, well, that's because the brain is addicted to matter, and because it's addicted to no, I'm not talking about that. Basic ABCs, a demoralized mind cannot comprehend. We see that all the time. They can't. And Yuri says it can't be reversed. You have to wait till another generation to do it. I kind of believe that only with normal people. I think if a person is practicing a real type of spirituality, which is not escapism in nature, they can reverse those effects. But because a lot of people don't even know that concept, I do admit, I could look around, most spiritual groups, look around YouTube, and everyone's demoralized. And that's why the information comes off like that. It comes off like very unstable. It comes off, not well researched, because in the end of the day, everyone, myself included, have to fight that. But you can't fight it if you don't know it exists. And that's why I think it is, because most people are not into that type of stuff. Most people, when they think intelligence agencies, they think espionage, they think James Bond. That stuff is only 20% of intelligence agencies. Yes, the other part is information gathering. But guess what? They got machines. NSA, they got machines to gather information. They don't even need humans to do that. The humans come in because the humans can infiltrate all levels of society, education, entertainment, definitely education though, primary sectors, right? You can infiltrate government, obviously, because intelligence agencies are government, so you can infiltrate that. But once you get the education, once you get the people who have positions of power, once they're demoralized, you got to actually checkmate the whole society. And once you demoralize a generation, I don't care what degree you got. I don't care how much money you have. You already are, in a sense, checkmated. And that's why when you look at it, if anyone pays attention, when you look at people who are in an intelligence agency, they just move so much faster. They just move so much not emotional. Because the American version of demoralization seems to, what differs from the Russian version is that they can take emotional concepts and tie you into it even more. So while with the Russian version, okay, you can't process information, boom. With the American version, no, you can't process information, as well as highly emotional. So that then there's a whole bunch of information that takes you off the path and takes your focus off. So whether you obsess to only police brutality, whether someone's only obsessed with sports, whether someone's only obsessed with whatever the case might be, Kim Kardashian. Once someone's emotionally tied into it, it actually deviates their mind even more. It makes it even harder to reverse the effects. So while he says it can't be reversed, I think it could be reversed, but only a person really armed with spirituality, healthy spirituality, as well as a practical application of science and social sciences can reverse it. So I got a lot of information on the info page, different videos that talk about it. Look it up, and until next time, peace.